Snow fell like ash that morning, soft and endless, as the black limousine cut through the quiet Connecticut road. Eli Turner watched the frost gather on the glass, his reflection faint against the blur of pines. He hadn't seen his mother in 5 years, not since she told him never to come home again. Now, he was coming back, uninvited, unwanted, unstoppable. What kind of mother bans her son for being poor? He whispered the question under his breath, not out of bitterness, but disbelief that it ever happened. Daniel glanced at him through the mirror. "You sure about this?" Eli smiled faintly. "No." The gates appeared in the fog. Iron, cold, familiar. Beyond them stood the Turner mansion, all glittering windows and old pride. He thought of the last words she said. "Don't embarrass us again." The car slowed. The gate opened. And in that moment, something inside him hardened. He wasn't coming home. He was coming to reclaim what exile had built in him. The front door opened before Eli could reach it. Margaret stood there, wrapped in pearls and winter silk, her posture perfect, her eyes unreadable. For a moment she didn't move, just looked at him as if trying to remember the last time she'd cared. "Eli," she said, voice crisp as frost. He smiled, polite, measured. "You said I couldn't come home for Christmas." "You didn't say I couldn't visit." Her lips trembled, though she hid it well. Behind her, the mansion glowed with the warmth of people who never left. He glanced past her shoulder, saw the faint silhouette of his sister in the hallway, frozen mid-step. "You shouldn't have come," Margaret whispered. "Maybe not," Eli said quietly, "but I already did." Inside, the house smelled of pine and expensive candles. Eli stood in the foyer where portraits lined the walls, every face looking proud and unbroken. His father's photograph hung in the center. Stern eyes, proud posture, and beneath it, a family photo where Eli's space was now empty. He let his gaze linger, then turned toward the sound of hesitant footsteps. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a red sweater. Her eyes glistened, torn between joy and fear. "You really came back," she breathed. He nodded softly. "Yes, I missed the tree." She ran down the stairs and hugged him before she could stop herself. It felt like time folding in half, a memory replayed too late. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. Silverware scraped faintly against porcelain. Margaret spoke about neighbors, charity events, anything but the sun across the table. Eli answered with small smiles. "No stories, no explanations." Clara tried to break the silence with laughter that quickly faded. The walls felt smaller than he remembered, the warmth forced, every flicker of candlelight catching on unspoken truths. When Margaret finally looked at him, her eyes softened for a second before hardening again. "You've done well for yourself, I see," she murmured. Eli raised his glass, a hint of irony in his voice. "You could say that." Later that night, Eli stood alone by the window overlooking the snowy yard. His reflection blended with the ghostly lights outside. Daniel waited by the car, engine humming softly, a reminder that Eli didn't belong here anymore. He pulled a folded letter from his coat pocket. The last one his mother ever sent him. The one that said, "Don't come back until you've made something of yourself." He looked toward the mansion's glowing windows and whispered, "Would she even love me now that I have?" The answer came in silence, only the snow replying. Behind him, the sound of heels clicked softly across the floor. Margaret's voice, low, almost human, said, "You didn't tell me you'd be arriving in style." Eli turned slightly, his face unreadable. "You told me not to come poor." Morning came with a silence too heavy for Christmas Eve. Eli woke to the distant echo of laughter from downstairs, the sound of guests arriving, of a celebration he wasn't meant to join. He dressed slowly, adjusting his tie like armor, each motion steady, controlled. From the window he could see Daniel polishing the limousine, snow glinting off the hood like crushed diamonds. For a moment, Eli wondered if he should leave before it all began, before pride and pain dressed themselves as holiday warmth. But something inside him refused. He'd been silent too long, polite too long. The son who once begged for belonging had outgrown the need. Downstairs, the piano began to play, and Margaret's voice floated upward like smoke. "We only invite people who belong here." Eli smiled faintly to himself. "Good," he whispered, buttoning his jacket. "Let's see who still does." Downstairs, the house gleamed like a magazine spread. Red ribbons, crystal chandeliers, every corner screaming perfection. Guests filtered in, coats dusted with snow, their laughter bouncing off marble floors. Margaret floated through them like a queen in exile. Smile, flawless, eyes restless. When she finally saw Eli at the foot of the stairs, the air shifted. Her hand froze on her glass. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us," she said, each word balanced on politeness and panic. "Neither did I," Eli replied, descending one slow step at a time. Every gaze turned toward him, curious whispers forming like wind through glass. He reached the bottom, smiled softly, and kissed her cheek. "Merry Christmas, Mother." Clara found Eli later by the fire, the crowd thinning as the evening pressed on. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, sitting beside him. "You know how she gets when things look imperfect." Eli chuckled softly. "I'm the imperfection she made." She turned toward him, eyes heavy with guilt. "She doesn't hate you, Eli. She just doesn't know how to love what she can't control." He looked at her, the firelight dancing across their faces. "Then maybe it's time she learns." A pause lingered between them. "Half peace, half warning. Be careful," Clara said. "She still thinks you came here to prove something." Eli's voice dropped to a whisper. "I did." Margaret retreated to her study, away from the music and laughter. Her reflection stared back from the dark window, older, lonelier, untouched by the joy outside. When the door creaked open, she didn't turn. "You've grown bold," she said quietly. Eli stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I learned from you." Her breath caught, a mix of anger and regret. "You think walking in here with your driver in your car changes anything?" He smiled slightly. "No, it just made you answer the door." For a moment, her facade cracked, the truth trembling behind her poise. "You've made your point," she said coldly. "Now leave before you ruin Christmas." Eli's voice softened. "You already did." As the party faded, the mansion fell quiet again. Eli stepped outside for air, the snow crunching under his shoes. The limousine lights glowed faintly in the distance, Daniel waiting, patient as ever. The night sky stretched endless above him, cold, perfect, silent. He looked back at the mansion. Every window a different memory, every light a lie I'd once believed. Somewhere inside, his mother was probably rehearsing her version of the story. The prodigal son who showed up uninvited. He smiled to himself, the kind of smile that carried both pain and peace. "Let her have it," he murmured. "I'll write my own this time." The morning came dim and heavy, the house quiet except for the whisper of wind brushing against the old windows. Eli wandered the hallways barefoot, his steps echoing in rooms that felt smaller than memory allowed. Every portrait seemed to watch him, reminders of the son who'd been erased from the frame. He stopped before his old bedroom door, fingers grazing the brass handle. It opened with a sigh, dust motes rising like ghosts, startled from sleep. The walls were bare now, stripped of every poster, every trace of who he'd been. In the corner sat the same broken lamp, the one his father never fixed. Eli stood there, breathing in the hollow scent of old winters and silence. For the first time, he wasn't angry, just tired of being missing from his own home. He ran his hand over the desk where his mother once left report cards, with red marks circled in shame. He could still hear her voice, sharp, exacting, always disappointed. But beneath that echo was another. His father's laughter, faint and forgotten, from the years before pride replaced love. Eli found an old photograph wedged behind the drawer, yellowed at the edges. It was him, Clara, and their father by the lake. Margaret behind the camera, smiling, rare and unguarded. He held the photo gently, tracing the crease across his father's face. For a brief moment, his throat tightened. That house used to hold warmth once, before money became the measure of love, before exile became proof of failure. Clara found him sitting on the edge of the bed, the photograph still in his hand. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she sat beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "She threw most of your things away," Clara said softly. "Said it would make it easier." Eli nodded, eyes still on the photo. "Easier for who?" She smiled sadly. "No one, I guess." He finally looked at her. Really looked. There was the same spark of kindness she'd always had, buried under the weight of keeping peace in a war she never started. "You used to sneak letters under my door," he said. Her eyes widened. "You remember that?" He smiled faintly. "I remember everything." Later, Margaret stood alone in her husband's old study, staring at his untouched chair. Her reflection swam in the dark glass of the window. Behind her, Eli entered quietly. "You kept everything of his," he said, voice low. "You even kept his ghost." She turned, startled, then defensive. "He built this house. I honor him by keeping it as he left it." Eli stepped closer, eyes steady. "You honored him by pretending we were perfect." The air between them thickened. Margaret's voice broke just slightly. "You were supposed to be like him, Eli. Strong, certain." He met her gaze. "You mean obedient." Her silence was an answer. For the first time, her composure cracked, not from anger, but from grief she never learned to release. That night, the wind howled through the chimneys, and the mansion felt alive with memories that refused to rest. Eli walked the corridor once more, each step drawing him back to the door at the end, the attic. He'd been forbidden to go there since childhood, told it was where old things went to die. But tonight, curiosity burned louder than fear. He climbed the narrow stairs, the wood creaking under his weight. The attic door opened with a reluctant groan. Inside, beneath sheets and shadows, sat boxes marked with his name. Letters, photos, school projects, all the things he thought were lost. He opened the first box, trembling. Inside lay the past his mother tried to erase, and in that moment, Eli understood. She didn't throw him away. She hid him. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in tension so thick it could be felt through the walls. Margaret ordered the staff to prepare an elegant dinner, silver cutlery polished, candles perfectly aligned, the illusion of harmony set on display. Eli watched from the doorway as Clara arranged the napkins, her hands trembling just slightly. He could sense her fear of what tonight might bring. When their eyes met, she mouthed, "Please don't start anything." But this wasn't about starting. It was about ending. As the grandfather clock struck 7, guests took their seats, laughter forced and hollow. Margaret sat at the head of the table, regal in her silence. Eli took the seat directly across from her, the distance between them small but unbridgeable. The air hummed with the weight of everything unsaid. Dinner began with small talk, the kind meant to fill the silence rather than heal it. Margaret spoke of Charity Gallus and neighbors' children, her tone polished like glass. Eli listened, letting her words fall like snow that would never settle. Finally, she looked up and asked, "And what is it you do now, Eli?" Her voice carried the sweetness of curiosity laced with poison. He smiled faintly, setting down his fork. "I own the company that bought the one that fired me." For a heartbeat, the entire room froze. Margaret's eyes flickered, just once, before she forced a smile. "How industrious," Eli leaned back. You taught me that, remember? Survival looks a lot like ambition. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Clara's hand trembled around her glass. For once, Margaret had no reply. The dinner carried on, though the taste had gone from the food. Laughter rose and died quickly, swallowed by the tension that wrapped around the table like smoke. Clara reached for Ely's hand under the table, a silent plea for peace, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted his glass and said quietly, "To family, whatever that still means." The toast hung in the air, fragile and cutting. Margaret set her knife down slowly. "Family means knowing when to let go of the past," she replied. Ely nodded, eyes narrowing slightly. "Or knowing when to dig it up." His tone was soft, almost kind, but it landed like a blade. When the last guest excused themselves, silence returned like truth after a lie. Margaret remained seated, her hands folded neatly, refusing to look up. "You've made your point," she said softly. Ely leaned forward, voice calm but heavy. "You don't get to erase people, Mother. You just bury them in boxes and call it forgiveness." Her eyes widened. "You went to the attic." He nodded. "I found what you tried to forget." Her voice shook. "You weren't ready to come home." Ely's tone softened. "You didn't want me to." The candles flickered violently between them, light trembling like their restraint. Clara stood in the doorway, tears slipping down her face. "Please," she whispered. "Not tonight." But tonight was exactly when everything had to break. Ely stood from the table, the silence between them stretching thin as glass. "You said I couldn't come home until I became someone," he said quietly. "So I did. But somewhere along the way I stopped wanting to." Margaret's eyes filled, but she held them back, pride clinging to the last pieces of her armor. "You think money fixes what you broke?" she whispered. Ely shook his head. "No, but maybe honesty does." He placed a small envelope on the table. Inside, the deed to the house, recently bought under his company's name. "You wanted control. Now you can rent it from me." He turned to leave, his voice steady, final. "Merry Christmas, Mom," behind him. Her composure shattered into quiet, broken sobs. The kind that came too late to change anything. The house felt hollow after the storm of words, every sound now too sharp in the quiet. Ely sat by the fire, long after everyone had gone to bed, staring into the flames that burned like memory, bright, painful, and alive. He should have felt triumphant, but victory had no warmth. From the hallway came soft footsteps. Clara appeared, her sweater draped over her shoulders, something small clutched in her hands. "You forgot this," she said, placing a worn box on the table beside him. It was marked with his name in faded ink, the same handwriting as those attic boxes. "She told me to throw it away years ago," Clara whispered. "I couldn't." Ely stared at it, hesitant, as if touching it might reopen an old wound. "What's inside?" he asked quietly. "Letters," she said, eyes glistening. "The ones you wrote, and the ones she wrote, and the ones she never sent." Ely opened the box slowly, the scent of old paper filling the room. The first envelope was sealed with a faint red smudge, his name written in his mother's careful script. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded the letter. "I wish I could understand you," it began. "I wish I wasn't so afraid of what you might become." Her words wavered, raw and unguarded, the kind no one ever meant to read. Page after page, he read the confessions of a mother who had buried her shame in pride. "Every time I look at your empty chair, I wonder if I drove you away or saved you from me." By the third letter, his vision blurred. The anger that had built him began to crumble, leaving only the ache of what could have been. "She wrote them every year," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "Christmas, birthdays, everything. She just never sent them." Ely kept reading, his breath unsteady, as if each word was undoing something that had held him together too tightly. One letter ended simply, "I love you, but I don't know how to show it without hurting you." He sat back, the pages trembling in his hands. Why would she hide these? Clara's eyes glistened because she thought it was too late. Eli stared into the fire again, voice low. "Maybe it isn't." For the first time, he didn't sound angry, only lost, like a boy who had finally found proof that love had existed all along, just buried under fear. When Eli finally stood, it was past midnight. He walked down the hallway, each step quieter than the last, the letters pressed tightly in his hand. Outside his mother's door, he paused, unsure. For years, he'd imagined this confrontation ending with anger, not the ache of forgiveness forming in his chest. He knocked softly. No answer. He turned the handle, the door creaking open to reveal Margaret asleep in a chair, a half-empty glass beside her. The years looked heavier on her face now. Eli stepped closer, placed the stack of letters gently on her lap and whispered, "I read them." She stirred faintly, eyes flickering open just long enough to meet his. "Then you know," she breathed. Eli nodded. "I do." The next morning, the snow had stopped. The mansion stood still, covered in white, like a photograph frozen in time. Eli watched the sunrise from the porch, the cold biting his skin in a way that felt real, grounded. Daniel waited by the car, door open, engine humming softly. Clara appeared behind him, coat wrapped tight. "Are you leaving?" she asked. He smiled gently. "Not forever," she nodded, though her eyes shimmered with the same unspoken sadness. As he walked toward the car, the front door creaked open again. Margaret stood there, frail in her robe, holding one of the letters. "You came home," she said softly. Eli turned, snow catching in his hair. "No," he said, voice calm. "You finally let me." The snow was thick again by afternoon, blanketing the world in a silence too perfect to trust. Eli walked the length of the frozen garden, hands deep in his coat pockets, letters still in his mind like ghosts refusing to rest. He thought about leaving, about letting the mansion shrink into memory. But something kept him tethered. Maybe it was Clara's trembling smile, maybe his mother's cracked voice from the night before. The truth was simpler. He wasn't done yet. Behind him, Margaret appeared at the patio door, her breath fogging the glass before she stepped into the cold. "You'll catch your death out here," she murmured. Eli didn't turn. "You already tried that once," he said softly. "When you told me I didn't belong." The words didn't carry anger this time, only exhaustion. She hesitated, eyes glistening. "And now," he exhaled, watching his breath drip, "now I'm trying to forgive you before I forget you." Inside, the fire burned low. Margaret stood near it, staring into the flames as if they might rewrite her past. Eli entered quietly, the sound of the door closing like the start of something inevitable. "I was cruel," she said before he could speak. "I told myself it was love, that I was pushing you to be stronger. But all I did was push you away." Eileen's voice was low, steady. "You hurt me because you were afraid I'd fail. But when I did, you disappeared." She looked at him, tears slipping through her mask of pride. "I didn't know how to love a broken version of you." Eli shook his head. "Then you didn't love me at all." The silence after that line was unbearable, yet somehow freeing. Two people standing in the wreckage of what family used to mean, deciding whether to rebuild or walk away. Clara entered halfway through the silence, her presence small but steady. "You both keep fighting for the last word," she said, voice trembling. "But you never notice it's the same one." They turned toward her, startled. "Love," she whispered. "That's what you're both trying to say. You're just too proud to say it." Her voice broke. the truth cracking open the room. Margaret's shoulders fell, her composure shattering for good. Eli stared at her, years of anger and hurt battling against the faintest flicker of mercy. "She's right," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "But love doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen." Margaret nodded through tears. "Then let it mean starting again." The fire hissed softly, a small spark breaking through the ash. Later, Eli walked through the hall one last time, the weight of his decision pressing like winter air. He paused before the family portrait that once hung perfect and untouched. Now he saw it for what it was, a performance. Reaching into his coat, he pulled a smaller photograph from the attic box. Him, Clara, and their father at the lake. He pinned it beside the framed portrait, uneven and unpolished. For the first time, the wall looked human. Clara joined him quietly, slipping her arm through his. "You're staying?" she asked. Eli smiled faintly. "No, but I'm not running either." They stood together in silence, the house no longer haunted, just tired. When Eli stepped outside, the snow had turned to light flurries, soft as forgiveness. Daniel opened the car door, waiting quietly. "You sure you're done in there?" he asked. Eli looked back at the mansion, its windows glowing faintly through the haze, its edges softened by distance. "No," he said. "But maybe she finally understands that I never wanted her apology. I just wanted her to see me." He climbed into the car, resting his head against the seat. As they pulled away, the house faded behind the fog, replaced by open fields of white. For the first time in years, Eli didn't feel exiled. He just felt free. He just felt free. The morning air smelled like snow and new beginnings. Eli stepped out onto the porch, boots crunching softly through the untouched white, a quiet rhythm against the stillness of the estate. The mansion behind him seemed smaller somehow, less imposing, its grandeur softened by the frost. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a thick scarf, her eyes warm but wary. "Breakfast?" she asked gently. He shook his head, gazing at the horizon where the sun had begun to burn through clouds, scattering light across the fields. "Not yet," he said, voice low, reflective. "I need to walk a while, just to feel the ground under my own feet again." Clara nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Some journeys couldn't be rushed, even if home was finally within reach. As he walked down the driveway, Eli felt each step connect him to the earth in a way he hadn't in years. The limousine idled silently behind him, Daniel standing ready, hands in pockets. "You sure about this?" Daniel asked. Eli didn't turn. "I want to walk," he said. "Let the snow remind me of what I've missed." Daniel smiled faintly, accepting the quiet rebellion. The mansion loomed behind them, windows aglow, but this time it wasn't a prison. It was a memory, a place stitched with pain and hope. Every footstep through the crisp snow became a rhythm of reclamation, a song only he could hear. Halfway down the road, Eli stopped and turned. The mansion was framed by frost-laden trees, the golden glow of its windows reflecting in the snow. A deep inhale filled his lungs, cold and sharp, and he realized forgiveness wasn't a gift to anyone else. It was for him. Margaret had tried, Clara had tried, and even he had tried, each in their own flawed way. Now it was his choice to carry it forward or leave it behind. He smiled faintly, a small curve of relief. The past had shaped him, but it didn't define him. The road stretched open, white and infinite, and for the first time he felt ready to walk toward everything he could become. Clara finally joined him, footsteps muffled by snow. "Going somewhere?" she asked softly, hands in her pockets, scarf wrapped tight. Eli looked at her, eyes steady. "Somewhere I haven't been in a long time. My own version of home." She smiled, warmth spreading across her face. "Will you come back?" he asked quietly. "Eventually," she said, "but you need this first." He nodded, stepping forward again, boots sinking into the soft snow. Together they walked toward the horizon, the mansion fading behind them, but the family it represented no longer lost, just changed, surviving and alive in their hearts. By the time they reached the edge of the driveway, Eli paused. He looked at the car, at the mansion, and then down at his boots in the fresh snow. "I'm leaving it behind," he said softly. Daniel nodded in understanding. Eli adjusted his coat, inhaled sharply, and stepped forward into the open road, the snow crunching underfoot like a new heartbeat. Clara stayed beside him for a moment, then waved before heading back. The road ahead was blank, endless, and for the first time, he felt the thrill of choice. Not exile, not revenge, not fear, but freedom. Snowflakes swirled around him, each one a tiny promise that the past could only follow if he allowed it. And he wouldn't.